Okay, so first of all, I'm going to cover business planning and strategy. So the key message here is that planning is absolutely key. I'm sure that you have all got your strategic plans back in the office that you use on a regular basis to make sure that you're taking your business in the right sort of direction and that you're maximising on the opportunities. When you're entering new markets, it's just the same as establishing the plan for your domestic market. You have to think about all the different attributes that you need to cover off. So I would always start off with the vision and goals. What are you trying to achieve by going into those new markets? It's quite interesting. If we look at some of the data that UKTI put out, there are principally 4 different reasons for the strategic thinking behind why businesses go into new markets. The first is very much from a strategic position point of view. This is where people have carried out a lot of planning, a lot of research, a lot of analysis, and have worked out where the opportunities are. That's about 20% of those people that go into new markets. The next group are those that have a formal plan and take account of some sort of external influence, but don't really take it to that level of research and analysis. And that's about a quarter of those people that go to new markets. The third category are reactive. They don't really have a formal plan. They maybe have some thoughts and some ideas in their mind, and they just see what kind of happens. And the final group, which is the largest group at 37%, are those that are completely passive, have no plan, and things happen by accident. What you don't want to be is in that last category. If you want to be successful, you need to be in the first category, and you've got to work out what your vision is, what your goals are, and what you're trying to achieve. There are various reasons why people will look at going into new markets. You may want to do it to be more productive and to take advantage of innovation. You may want to build in some resilience to downturns. You want to improve your financial position. You want to improve your brand profile and positioning. Or simply you may want to stay in business. You need to think about how you can actually expand out of a slow-moving market for you. It doesn't have to be any one of those individually. It could be a combination of those factors that drive your reason to go to external markets. But whichever one it is, it's going to impact on your strategy and more importantly on the tactics that you employ to get into that market successfully. Start to think about what success will look like. Think about how you're going to measure success. What are those key performance indicators going to be? Think about your end game. Start at the end and work backwards. What do you want to achieve? If your ambition within your existing business is to build value, to make an exit in X years' time, think about how going international will actually improve that strategy, but more importantly, what do you need to do when you set up that international business to enable that strategy for your overall business to be successful? Alternatively, if you're looking to build a business where you're going to have income generation for future generations within the family coming through, that may well impact on how you structure and how you run those operations. Think about the target market that you're going to go into. Why will people buy from you in that market? Is it going to be for the same reasons that they're buying from you in the domestic market? What do you offer? And how do you differentiate from people that are already providing a similar or consistent product or service in that market? There's no doubt that exporting will change your business risk. Even with the same products taken to a new market, your risk profile is going to be different. You're going to have to think about credit risk. You're going to have to think about retention of title on your products. You may well be very happy with understanding how you can get your products back when you need to in the UK market, but do the same rules and regulations apply overseas? We often find that when people have more than one place of business in the UK, dealing with risk management across those different centres becomes more difficult. Throw in cross-border remote risk management and it's another layer altogether. Think about what capacity you need to deal with export. What resource constraints do you have within your business? What impact is it going to have on your employees? What sort of additional employees will you need both in the UK as well as in terms of delivering the services or goods overseas? What about your production capacity? How quickly can you ramp that up if you're successful in your new markets? Does that capacity need to take place in the UK, or will you have to look at other areas? Think about finance. Not just the investment in getting into the new market, but actually how you grow that business in a new market. You're likely to have to include foreign exchange requirements, and you may have to think about hedging requirements as well. You may well have built up some IP in the UK in terms of your offering already, but how is that IP going to translate across borders? How do you protect that in new jurisdictions? How do you set up your licensing arrangements to take account of that IP? I think generally people would say that doing business in the UK is relatively easy. Certainly the global indices that are put together on a regular basis show the UK as being a pretty easy place to do business. That's certainly not true of certain other areas of the world. And if there's an assumption that you can actually replicate the way that you do business when you go overseas in every location, then it's just not going to be the case. Taking an example of working in Latin America, the conditions for doing business there are certainly more challenging. Areas like employment law are very different to the UK, legislation is different, and the degree of litigation and how quickly litigation gets dealt with is on a completely different timeline to the UK. People often think that going into the US will be easier than some other locations, but actually you're working with a different environment there. Not only are you dealing with the state level, but you're dealing with federal level. And there's interaction between those two ingredients that mean you've got to plan very carefully, and just don't think that going to the first location that you see on a map is going to be the right place. Think about real estate as well. Often people start their ventures into new territories by thinking about agency or distribution arrangements. That's fine, you can set up the arrangements with your preferred partners in those locations. But there may well be an advantage in thinking about local warehousing. Would there be an advantage in holding some of your own stock on site close to those distributors? Would that actually encourage them and motivate them to look after you over and above somebody else that they're actually distributing for? Think about the growing pains that you'll go through by going into new markets. You've got your existing business that you need to take account of, and you mustn't overlook that core business that's done you well to date. You get into a market that starts to work well, and people then start to accelerate and build on that model quite quickly. But just take care and take time to make sure that you're fully bedded down in one market at a time. Take time to learn the local customs and the local ways of doing business. It is different, it is cultural. Take incremental steps and think about the impact on your resources. Thinking about the market in a bit more detail, you'll have a good understanding of what your product offering is, what your service offering is, and you should be able to identify why it's valuable. But think about why those products and services are valuable in the new markets. Think about how you can analyse and carry out research into market segmentation. Look at the local competition and think about the market size. Just because certain factors will hold true for you in the UK doesn't necessarily mean they'll hold true in a new market. Look at the local trade conditions. Think about local legislation and regulations. How are they different to those that you're used to dealing with? Look at the economic conditions. Look at the socio-economic trends. Growing and fast emerging markets will have different demographics, different dynamics to a UK marketplace. We've certainly seen that in areas like Brazil and China over the last few years that have had fast growth for a number of years, but those growth rates are slowing down. Certainly within Brazil, you could argue that a lot of that growth was on the back of consumers and the emerging middle class that were buying a lot of white goods. That market has reached a bit of saturation as people have actually run out of credit. Thinking about those sort of issues in the context of what you're trying to do in your markets will actually help with your market research and actually your market positioning. Think about the different stakeholders in that market. Who are the local consumers? Who are the focus groups that you could join in with? Work out an advisor network, which professionals you need to be connected with. Think about your banking partners. A good starting point in the banking partners may well be your UK bankers, but they may not have correspondent offices within the markets you're going to. You may need to establish new relationships. You'll certainly have to think about what sort of facilities you require. Think about federal and state issues because they could well be different in different locations. Pricing. Price points will be different in different markets. Again, you've got to get an understanding of how the pricing of your product will differ depending on the different audiences that you're working with. Think about how you're going to get paid. Credit control is going to be very different in a different location and across borders. And work out how you can find out where your high value opportunities are. Think about sources of funding, not just in the UK, but in the new market. There may well be subsidies and incentives available that you can take account of. Think about local investors that could actually join in and assist in funding your growth plans. Question why subsidies exist. Often they're there to encourage employment. Does that actually mean or translate into the fact that the sort of talent you're looking for doesn't necessarily exist in that location? So consider the pros and cons of taking those subsidies against the locations they're driving you towards. Continuing on the theme of local talent, recruitment processes may well be different, so think about where you're going to get that talent from. Are you going to take some of that talent from your UK business? What impact does that have on your visa requirements? Think about retention techniques. Again, they may well be different in a different market to the UK. They may not be incentivised by the same reasons that UK employees are incentivised. Think about workplace benefits. They're not necessarily the same. People may not be motivated by the same package of benefits that you have within the UK. Look at the labour regulations. They're almost certain to be different, as will welfare and social security. We're well aware there'll be cultural differences, but just to understand what that means in terms of the working day. Certainly in certain territories, seasonality has a big impact, as does working hours, as does religion. Work out what that means in the context of what you can actually do. I think having the right commercial partners is highly valuable in your venture into a new market, and there's a number of sources that you can go to build that network around you. If you get the right commercial partners, they can help provide practical in-country knowledge, advice and experience. But don't just use them at the outset of your journey. They should become partners in what you're trying to do over time, because they can keep you up to date and they can provide insight in what's going on as things change around you. Look at embassies, consulates and high commissions. They have people on the ground. They can give you insight into what's happening. If we look at UKTI, they have international trade advisors in over 100 countries across the world. Plug into that network. They have really good value contacts that they will introduce to you. They publish on a regular basis sales leads that may be of interest. They certainly issue business alerts that will keep you up to date on what's happening. They can provide in-market information services that will be of value to you. Think about using your existing customers and suppliers. Look at new network partners if there are networks that you're part of within your trade or industry. Think about the range of sales agents and distributors that you can use to learn more about the market. Build an intermediary market. Look at the various chambers of commerce. We tend to think about those that are based in the UK, but you'll certainly find that in the locations that you're tending to go to, there will be local equivalents. Work out which ones are valuable and which ones you can use in country. Think about whether there are specialist advisors that you can connect with. What professional advisors will help you. But also think about regulators and government bodies. Again, a good source of information that will help you, particularly around products, will come from those areas. If you're thinking about R&D activity in the country that you're going to, then work out whether there are sources of academia that can help you with that program. They could be good sources of knowledge as to what has already happened, what's already in train, and how you can actually enhance what you wish to do. So I'd urge you to use those commercial partners to really understand and learn about the local culture and about language as well. Once you arrive in the new market, logistics is going to be important. You need to think about where you're sourcing your product from. So not only have you got to think about origination, but you've got to think about destination. You've got to think about where stock will actually be held in country. You need to think about what facilities you require for dealing with those stock movements. There are likely to be infrastructure issues in the countries that you arrive in, so think about efficiency, robustness and reliability of transport links. Are you going to use air, road or rail? Again, coming back to Brazil, You can fit Western Europe into Brazil, but the primary transport links are going to be the road. But it can take more than 7 days to ship goods from the south to the north. You've got to factor that into your planning. Think about your insurance arrangements. So not just around credit control, but in terms of on your product. When do those risks and rewards change? Is it the point that you ship, on arrival, on delivery? Where do you go to for those insurance arrangements? Think about local documentation around duties, license fees, distribution agreements, product documentation, quality standards, and what the procurement processes are going to be. They will not necessarily be the same as you're used to. Think about what language is going to be used in that supply chain. Again, in certain countries that you might end up in, yes, there will be certain people that will have English skills, but that's not necessarily true of the whole team that you're dealing with. Your choice of partners in dealing with logistics will vary from region to region. Whilst it's entirely possible you could use the same provider across Europe, if you go to mainland China, you may well find you have different providers in each province. You'll need to tailor your marketing. You can't just assume that the marketing we have in the UK is going to translate well into new markets. You need to think about the route to market. What channels do you currently use? What new channels will you require in those new markets once you've identified who your customers are? They will certainly vary from the domestic channels that you're using currently. Understand what the customs and rules are around the marketing streams. Really think about product branding and product names. There are many, many stories out there where people have got it wrong in terms of trying to take a brand that works well in one country into a new country, and on translation, it causes a real issue. Look at your website. How does that need to be adapted for the new market? It's not just a case of changing the language that's used on there, but you may well have to change the way in which you present your message, your image, your products. Carefully think about the translation of your promotional material. Look at your brochures, your leaflets, your technical documentation, and make sure that that translation comes across properly and is properly understandable for your consumers. And don't overlook social media. Again, you've probably got social media covered in the UK, but how does that change in a new market? How do you need to change what you're doing around that? Think about how you need to change your SEO so that you're actually driving people in the local market to you. It's not necessarily the same as in the UK.